It's Thursday, July 31st. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is John Daigle of Establish the Run. John, what's going on, buddy?
Doing great, and it's the time of the year where you and I get tagged in to talk about fantasy drafts, training camp, and I'm sure we're going to touch on a lot of that today.
Absolutely, dude. We have a football game tonight. The Hall of Fame game is to how jacked up are you to see, the Chargers are going to be playing some of their rookies, but for the most part, guys that we will never think about from a fantasy standpoint ever.
How jacked up am I to see Amari Hampton get 3 carries? I sadly am really jacked up about it, and we'll be watching tonight too.
Dude, I'm excited. I will say, I'm excited to see Keandre Lambert-Smith, the Chargers 5th round rookie. That guy can legit get deep. He's made a bunch of highlight training camp plays. So I am certainly excited to see what he has to offer. But the real deal today is, we're going to be talking some do's and don'ts for your upcoming drafts. But before we get to that, of course, you guys know this if you've been watching the show, if you've been listening, big news to share. We have launched a new Yahoo Fantasy YouTube page to give you a one-stop shop for all of your fantasy needs. And even bigger news, this podcast is going to go live every Sunday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on the Yahoo Fantasy YouTube channel starting August 4th. So literally this upcoming Monday, it is approaching like a freaking freight train. That is an important date because once it's August 4th, all of our episodes and all of our content are going to be on that new YouTube channel and no longer on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page, the main one. We're going to have links to subscribe in the comments, the captions of the show, all the shows that we're doing. I'm going to take personal offense, as you know. I'm going to take personal offense if you don't subscribe. So this is it. This is the final show on the main channel. So migrate on over. You can stay here, watch, basketball, baseball, whatever content, but make sure you are migrating over to the main. Actually, I guess Football 301's on there too. So that's a show I'm on as well. So definitely still subscribe to the main channel, but make your way over to the fantasy YouTube channel. All right, enough of that. Let's get to the meat of the show. To kick off August and the official start of fantasy draft season, we are here to identify 12 do's and don'ts this draft season. For the first half of the show, John is going to share his do's. I'm going to share my don'ts, and then we are going to flip responsibilities. So, Daigle, give us your first do of this draft season.
I will have some big picture takeaways throughout this show, but I do want to start with mentioning that everyone should go to their draft and do take all of the 49ers. It is that simple. Do not fall into the trap of recency bias from last year, where the iteration we're seeing on the field this season, Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, and Jawan Jennings, all only were available for 10% of San Francisco's plays. Left tackle Trent Williams also missed a career high in games just last year. Whereas at least we saw, especially at these ADPs that Jennings, Pearsall, Kittle, these guys are being drafted at. Even Christian McCaffrey's going to fall to 112, the back of the first round, and your home league. We saw all of them spike ceilings. Jennings had an absurd 41% target share with Deebo Samuel off the field last year. Pearsall closed the season with over 100 yards and a touchdown and 6 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. And his last 2 games without both Brandon Ayuk and Deebo. The 49ers projected with the league's easiest schedule of opposing defenses this year. And more importantly, when you're talking about this flat tier of tight end as everyone dives in and starts figuring out when to take that onesie position, Brock Bowers is going to go super early around Bucky Irving, Drake London, A.J. Brown. It's a conversation in itself. But George Kittle, despite being the tight end 1 in fantasy points per game last year, falls a couple rounds later right now in home leagues. And Kittle, we've seen 4 starts without Deebo Samuel and with Brock Purdy, and he recorded an absurd 33% target share for 14 points per game. So I think it's as easy as closing your eyes, ignoring what happened last year, and going right back to drafting every single San Francisco player.
I love this call out because I completely agree with you on this. I'm putting together, I have rankings up all throughout the summer, but I'll be transparent with people. I don't really dial into and because look, I got a lot going on. Okay. I got receivers to chart. Things are happening. I don't really dial into the projections and then really like dialing in the rankings until right about now. And so I'm putting those together, and I've got a lot of these guys going ranked ahead of where they're going right now. Starting with like Brock Purdy, man. I mean, because here's the deal. Like, I think what people still are not dialed into, because the Niners had a disappointing season last year, Daigle, it's that like Brock Purdy took a big step in his individual development last year. They trusted him with running more like true drop back stuff, really getting under center. It wasn't the typical Shanahan, I'm going to hold your hand through all this whole thing. It's not anything like what they were doing with Jimmy Garoppolo. They were asking him to play big boy quarterback, and by and large, he was really successful doing it. Like, I think, again, this is my opinion, I think Purdy's graduated to the point where he's a top 10 real life NFL quarterback. So I want to get supporting pieces of this offense, because these guys are still very, very good when they're healthy. I was going to ask you, like, if you had a lean towards one specific Niner, maybe one or two, because it sounds like you're going to tell me George Kittle is that guy. But if you had like two favorite targets to take from this offense, maybe besides Christian McCaffrey, who are they?
I'm glad you put the caveat of not Christian McCaffrey, since I'm kind of building my entire personality this offseason around making sure we all take Christian McCaffrey and ignore last year's injury. But the other two would be, yes, Juwan Jennings. I love Ricky Pearsall, and I think he does fit in the same mold as Deebo Samuel, which is why they drafted him in the first round. Just an explosive guy who they can also put in the backfield. But Jennings, you know, I don't get to catch every Football 301 show, but I'm sure you've talked about how he just emerged last year and proved to all of us that he can earn targets at an elite threshold. And so I do believe he's the true wide receiver 1X player there. And then, yes, George Kittle, of course, if only because he is dominant in a range of ADP that we are happy to accept, because that's when I'm not saying the bad running backs, but that's when the dead zone really begins, in that 4th, 5th round range, whenever we are trying to decide between the Kenneth Walkers and Aaron Jones of the worlds in our home leagues.
I think I really appreciate Juwan Jennings' game. I think he's like a rock solid player. I think that he has the higher floor, whereas I believe that Pearsall has a higher ceiling as a player, because when we're talking about the Deebo Samuel like replacement part of it, the thing that's different is that like Ricky Pearsall, I think, has already shown to be a much better man coverage beating receiver. And we'll see like what the 49ers get from a defensive perspective right this year, because they did see so much man coverage last year, but a lot of that was because Christian McCaffrey wasn't there. So if McCaffrey's back out there, maybe they see some more typical structures. So I'm curious to see like if his role really develops into something like, to me, watching him last year, you know, in isolation, like it was a very different role than what you normally see out of Niners receivers. Like he's run a lot of whips and returns, and I think being more of like not just a slot player, but a guy that moves all across the formation. So I don't think you have to be out on one to be in on the other, but because Pearsall goes a little bit later, I've typically taken more of him or been drawn more to him than Juwan Jennings.
And you touched on Purdy. I don't want him to be forgotten either, because the QB 6 on, let's say, is practically wide open. I've seen everyone from Justin Fields to Kyler Murray stacked there, and we'll get into why that is later on in this show. But Brock Purdy is wide open to be the QB 6 in fantasy this year, coming off his best, arguably, real life season, especially given all the pieces that he didn't have around him, and to still perform the way he did last year was truly incredible. But now we're getting back to full strength. We know the Niners continue to be one of the most efficient offenses, as you said, in the entire league. And since they'll have all their pieces to do what they do best and run their full offense, Purdy could easily just show up and, again, be that quarterback that should have been taken right after Joe Burrow.
Okay, before we move off this point, I do just want to give you the floor to implore people why they should take Christian McCaffrey, because I know that in our bubble, Daigle, like we know how good he is and how impactful a player he is, but there's going to be a section of people watching this show right now or listening to this podcast and saying, I'm never taking this guy again after what happened last year. Tell the people why you think that is a mistake.
And the 2 seasons prior under Kyle Shanahan that McCaffrey played with the 49ers, he was the RB1 and RB2 in points per game. He's the only running back who has had 21 plus points per game in multiple seasons the last 3 years. Not even Saquon Barkley accomplished that. And as we saw last year, even when he returned and was not at full strength, he outtouched Jordan Mason 42-3 in those games. They are not going to use anyone else. And it's a conversation like we had with Will Fuller whenever he was still at the tail end of his prime, when people are more scared of the injury. But you shouldn't be asking yourself that. Yeah. You should be asking, when you're not injured, can you win me my league? And Christian McCaffrey literally breaks fantasy football as the RB1 when he's healthy. And now you can get that guy at the back of the first round solely for recency bias. So I am back in one more time with Christian McCaffrey as a hero anchor RB build. And then that first, second round turn is where you can then take someone like Nico Collins. I know I listen to Matt Harmon shows. I know Nico Collins is a personal favorite of both of ours, but Malik Neighbors is sometime there as well. As we talked about earlier, Drake London is someone who should be going higher, someone I'm very high on as someone who could break out as a potential wide receiver 1. So you can go RB, wide receiver to start, and then come back around and see who's left over. But Christian McCaffrey, if you're in the back end, I think you should just be building your entire lineup around him.
I love it. And look, if we get, one training camp report that, he's missing some practices, then we can revise that. But now that he's currently healthy, like, this is the way you have to view him. So I'm glad. Hopefully that was a convincing argument for the people out there, because I am also back in on drafting Christian McCaffrey in that back half of the first round range. I'll go to my first don't of this draft season. And I apologize because my first two don'ts it's a little bit like old man yells at the clouds here, but I'm going to do it anyways. Number one is don't go too crazy over training camp clips. There is some really valuable stuff that comes out of NFL training camp, right? Who's running with the starters? When it's the consistent drumbeat of the guy, like, hey, man, he's getting consistent play with the first team. He's getting consistent praise, all this stuff. But I'm talking to just about like the clips that hit your timeline, the stuff that's making the big TV shows. And the reason I thought about this, Daigle, I'm curious if you've seen this stuff too. Obviously this is Christian McCaffrey that we're showing on the YouTube here. And look, like, it's awesome. I'm not telling you to not get excited about football. Okay. I will never be the don't get excited about football. It's good. But what I will say, and the player that made me think about this was actually Jameson Williams. And I'm not picking on Jameson Williams or saying not to draft him this year. But it was this rep, again, that we're showing on the YouTube right now. It's a great route by Jameson Williams. And generally, like, when we're talking about film, good reps are good reps. Okay. I'm not going to like nitpick competition, but I remember seeing this and thinking, who is number 23? And I look up on the Detroit Lions roster, the guy that's covering him in this clip. I'm like, it's Rocky Sin, who's on his 5th team as a cornerback, pretty young into his career. Like, you know what? Yeah, Jameson Williams should be winning that rep, bro. Like, that doesn't show me that, okay, he's taken a level this year, or he's doing something different. I've seen Jameson Williams run good out routes throughout his career. Like, this is not new information to me. So again, it's good to be excited. I love football. We all love football. Even just football adjacent things hitting our timelines again. It's great to see, but just, don't let it change like your projections or your opinions about players. So again, I apologize, Daigle, and everybody for being the old man to yell at a cloud here, but that has been on my mind of late.
I think people who are better at social media than I am understand this is how you get engagement, is to highlight these clips, but they are something I ignore entirely. I think one that actually moved ADP, shockingly enough, was a Javonte Williams run without pads on, whereas now every report the past few days has actually been that Miles Sanders is running with the ones more, and Javonte Williams is lacking pop as he did as one of the least efficient running backs in the league just last year. So I tend to, again, we've been in the streets for a long time now, so I can easily ignore these things, especially with how much football we consume on a daily basis. I now know exactly what to let in one ear and let out the other. But I agree with you. Do not let a clip, if anything, move the needle for you. Continue to listen to who is playing with the first team offense and who is a direct backup that we should also consider in the later rounds.
Yeah. I mean, people, even just this morning, like, people getting excited about Luther Burden. I'm like, man, I'm excited about Luther Burden potentially, like, long-term in this Bears offense too. But, the clip that's like making its round this morning is, of course, not the one that we're showing on the screen right now, but it's like, oh yeah, that's Tyson Bagent throwing him the football. Like, so he's not exactly like a full-time first team player yet. So again,
I'm just excited. I saw Luther Burden at practice with one of these clips because I didn't know that was happening.
Right. Either. Right, exactly. Like, that's a perfect thing. The information that's good is, hey, he's out there, he's playing, he's getting coached hard, right? I thought it was hilarious when people were freaking out about, oh, Ben Johnson's yelling at him or for not getting lined up right. It's like, well, number one, guy hasn't been out there all summer, which Ben himself was like, he's behind, he's going to make mistakes because he's behind. Also, Luther Burden, famously a mistake prone player. The reason I liked him landing with this Bears offense was, he's going to get coached hard. He's going to get pushed. And so that again was like, this is good signal. So again, I'm not saying like any of the guys that we've talked about or shown on the screen are bad draft picks or whatever. It's just, don't get carried away when an established player like Jameson Williams is toasting a guy who's on his fifth team, who hopefully the Lions are not going to have to play a lot of snaps this year. So with that, let's get more positive here, Daigle. Give us your second due of this fantasy draft season.
Last season, Jaden Daniels was every fantasy analyst favorite player for what he brought to the table and in terms of his ADP. This year, I could already tell you, I am not the only person who's going to come on the show and highlight Drake Maye because of what happened this offseason for him. Let's step back and talk about Josh McDaniels for a second, because for his career, he does deserve to be dunked on as a horrific head coach and GM, but strictly as a play caller. And this goes back to the Norv Turner, Wade Phillips of the world, where they were amazing. Steve Spagnuolo, for example, amazing at doing one thing, but when too much is put on their plate in the NFL, they clearly showed that they lacked in some departments. Josh McDaniels is an incredible play caller, so much so that if you look at the last 10 seasons, he's been allowed to finish with his team, and this includes the Raiders as well. 9 of those 10 offenses finished in the top half of the league in EPA per play, which shows us they were extremely efficient offenses. The blown outlier in that example is the Cam Newton Patriots. But remember, Cam Newton, not only did they get 7 wins with a quarterback who basically couldn't throw the ball at that portion of his career, he rushed for 12 touchdowns because of how McDaniels cleverly schemed him. And so with this offense and Drake Maye, who showed us in his 10 full starts, added on 4 rushing points per game and was the QB 10 in those spots, I believe that they have done everything this offseason to put him in a position to win immediately. Last year, that offensive line ranked 31st in ESPN's pass block win rate metric. This year, they go out, add a starting center in Garrett Bradbury, a veteran right tackle in Morgan Moses. They had Will Campbell from LSU with the 4th overall pick to play left tackle, and also upgrade the surrounding cast. We have Stephon Diggs playing from the slot. Kyle Williams, who is one of my favorite sleepers, not only added with significant day 2 draft capital, but a player who did win from the outside. He ran 82% of his routes from the boundary in college. And that's exactly what they need, since both Pop Douglas and Diggs highlight from the slot. And so I think everyone around Drake Maye has really just improved, which is naturally going to elevate Maye in this situation we talked about earlier, where the QB 6 through 12 are genuinely up for grabs. And that's where Maye could easily land, despite not being drafted there in your leagues.
People really underrate the difference between going from awful to solid, or even just functional. Like I won't even steal our buddy Josh Norris's term where he says awful to average. Like, I don't know if the Patriots are going to go to average on the offensive line or average in the pass catching group, but I think they're going to be solid to functional. And, I love hearing that Jared Wilson, the rookie center out of Georgia, is actually playing guard, because I think they're just trying to get their best 5 out there in training camp, which is smart. I actually am probably, and I'm curious if you agree, I think I'm still more concerned about the offensive line than the pass catching group, because Morgan Moses has been a solid starter at right tackle forever, but he is like a 34-year-old player. Could that drop off happen? Will Campbell is a rookie tackle that doesn't always just immediately hit the ground running. Garrett Bradbury was a guy the Vikings were desperate to get away from. So again, even if it's better in New England, it still might be like the 30th offensive line in the league, which is an upgrade over. They were probably 32nd last year. But to me, I more so mean this as like, I think this pass catching group, and specifically the receivers, can be really solid. And again, I was posting about this yesterday and kind of got some pushback from it. It's like, I'm not saying this is a top 10 wide receiver core in the NFL at all, but if Kyle Williams emerges as the X, and in training camp right now, he's competing with Kayshon Boutte at that X receiver position. And I'm glad you highlighted this. Like, he's a smaller guy, but he was a boundary player, 82nd percentile success rate in reception perception. Like, he doesn't have to be a slot guy at all. And I think Kayshon Boutte is like a nice backup X receiver. So even if he gets kind of the veteran deference, I think Williams will win that job in time. And the fact that like Matt Collins is not out there has been pretty big. I think Diggs is going to probably play more flanker than slot, which I think is a better fit for him at this point in his career than just running slot routes. Like, Pop Douglas is a totally solid slot receiver, Daigle. And that's not even to mention Hunter Henry, solid tight end, Travion Henderson receiving out of the backfield. I think if it's Williams at X, Douglas at slot, and Diggs, who I'm a little more confident in than the market right now, I think that this is a pretty solid, it's a functional group for May to work with in year 2.
Yeah, I forgot to even mention Travion Henderson, who did have the pass catching chops at Ohio State over Quinshon Judkins and averaged 7.5 yards per touch just last year. So everyone is improved. And for the offensive line, even if they were to go not the worst in the league, but slightly below league average this year, I would just remind everyone to look at what happened with Jacoby Brissett in the first month of the season, where the offense couldn't even be operated with him under center. And then Drake Maye comes in, and it's as if he didn't miss a beat, that he did not, he basically could operate a full offense behind that offensive line and make it seem like they were at least league average. And so the fact we at least have new pieces, I don't worry about it so much as everyone, given what Maye showed us last year.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think Drake Maye still needs to develop. Like, there's some holes in his game to iron out, but we know from a fantasy perspective, like the fact that he's going to rush the football is pretty big. So when you're looking at Drake Maye right now in drafts, where do you, like, how early is too early for Maye? Like, where do you kind of think he slots in? Because I agree with your comment earlier about the quarterback position, where like I have Patrick Mahomes and Kyler Murray at 6 and 7, and I'm not bullish on like either of those guys this year, because to me the tier is massive with like, it goes down all the way to like QB 15 or so before it kind of falls off again to a not massive degree. So where does Maye fall into that group for you?
Maye should always be drafted ahead of Jared Goff, but that's not going to happen in home leagues. Goff is still going to be treated as a top 8, top 9 guy incorrectly, and maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But he usually goes after the Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy range. And what's fun is that although I believe he can't elevate to a top 10 status, you never, ever have to take him there because, again, most people are looking at last year's stats and not trying to project instead of just drafting what happened last year. So I think everyone should be comfortable taking him as the QB 13, QB 14 off the board, even reaching for him a full round ahead of his ADP. But again, you are not going to have to spend early and important capital on him to make sure you get him.
Makes sense. All right, we're going to get to my second don't here. And again, this is still a little bit old man yells at the clouds here. Don't forget that prior year efficiency metrics, even the good ones, yards per out run is a good metric. First downs per route run, I think, is a really, really good metric as well. Successful plays per route run, explosive play rate. All those are good metrics, but don't forget that those can be impacted by the environment. When we're looking at like player team level. So you see a lot of this with guys, especially young players. I always come back to the Bears last year, where just 2024, I want to basically throw out every single efficiency metric from that season, because it was just such a horrible environment, like poison from a coaching level, rookie quarterback, we know the deal now with the 2024 Bears. It was a horrendous environment. Of course, also surrounding players play a big deal in that. Like, you are not going to get as many targets and yards per route run when you have a lot of guys available out there in the route. That was the Jackson Smith and Jigba story in 2023 when he was there with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. He takes a step in his second season. That's a lesson of that. And just generally too, like these offenses where, the quarterback takes a lot of sacks, that can impact efficiency metrics too. So don't just copy paste what happened last year from an efficiency standpoint with players, even for the good sticky metrics, and just assume like this is going to happen again this year. Like, be very, very open to kind of changes in environment. Because Daigle, like, that's where when you're able to pinpoint like, okay, this unit was this way last year, but it's going to change a little bit this year. That's when you can really make some profit there.
I like how you are going from the angle of profit, because I look at regression most of the time and say, and maybe this is my backwards way of profiting, is saying I actually don't want to draft this guy because of what happened last year. An example, as I just mentioned, Goff. Let's just go with that angle, because of everything he had around him and Ben Johnson, that they played their first 14 games indoors. And now we're talking about missing all of that. It's a much tougher schedule. Obviously, John Morton instead of Ben Johnson calling the plays. And then this the indoor schedule certainly helps, but for Jared Goff in his entire career, it's really been about him being a quarterback that craters whenever the pocket fails. A lot of players can still extend plays and they will get worse under pressure, but Jared Goff is someone who's night and day whenever he's under pressure. For his entire career, for example, 8 yards per attempt when kept upright, 5.8 under pressure. Also, his fantasy points per dropback literally double when he's kept clean as well. So given that the Lions are now missing their entire interior offensive line, including the retirement of all-pro center Frank Ragnow, I am really worried about Detroit's offense here. And even if they are a top 10 unit, I'm questioning if they can be as elite as they have been in the past, which is definitely going to dent some ADPs, Goff included.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and I think it's good to approach it both ways because same thing. I'm talking about the Bears, which in terms of like their pass catchers, first downs per route run, they ranked 31st in the NFL last year. I think some of those players are good. Some of them had bad years. I think DJ Moore played bad on an individual level. He played at a disappointing level. I think also there was just some environmental stuff there that I just highlighted. But Detroit was second. Detroit was second in terms of first downs per route run with their overall players. And like that, maybe those two, one comes up, one comes down. And obviously there's a connection there because the guy that was calling plays at one spot is now calling plays at the new spot. But yeah, this can go both directions where from a positive standpoint, things change with the environment. The efficiency of the players can go down. It's like, again, if Detroit in this metric finishes 10th or 11th, like, yeah, somebody is going to be disappointing in the offensive structure overall, but that doesn't mean that like the Amon-Ra St. Brown changed as a player, and I'm not really worried about St. Brown, or Jameson Williams is a different player. It's just the environmental stuff. Is there one Lion that you're kind of, besides Goff, like just because again quarterbacks you can just take somebody else? Is there one Lion of the skill position guys that you're kind of worried about?
Sam Laporta, especially at ADP, he'll be drafted as the tight end 4. Tight end 5 this year, whereas I think the gap between him and George Kittle should be much larger, given that one, I've been saying all offseason, this is the incorrect and unprofessional way to say it, that like the tight end 4 through the tight end 26, they're all the same guy. The correct way to say it is that it's a flat tier, right? Like you should not take Laporta because you can just wait till the end and take Tucker Kraft, Jake Ferguson, guys who have also last year both failed and succeeded in windows, because that's exactly what Sam Laporta did as well. But I do look at it as Sam Laporta failed at ADP expectations last year because of the emergence of Jameson Williams. That was the most routes Williamson ran in any season going back to high school. And because of that, he had his first 1,000-yard season. He earned a 17.5% target share. I don't think that target share goes away. And so now we're asking for the first time ever, if Jameson Williams continues to develop, and I believe he will, and basically what's his second NFL season, what happens to the rest of the target tree? And I think Sam Laporta, although he will provide a sporadic ceiling, I think Sam Laporta is the loser here.
Yeah, just like I mentioned, I'm kind of putting together like hard finished rankings right now, and just after going through projections, there's definitely a dip from the top 3 to Sam Laporta. He's kind of like ADP wise, at least in consensus ADP, is like a little bit of a no man's land between the top 3 guys and then the next tier, but he should be kind of bucketed with that next tier. I agree with you on that one. All right, we're going to toss to our first break. We come back. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Quickly on the Bears, I've had a hard time discussing them all offseason because all we're really doing is crossing our fingers and saying Ben Johnson, like look what this guy did. I bet he could do it again. And so it's tough to talk about them, but it's going to be fun because the offense is going to be completely different. I think Ben Johnson is one of those guys that takes his players and then builds around them. And you can't do that the same way, given that Jared Goff, he said, how do we make sure this guy is not disturbed and still get explosive plays out of that? Caleb Williams, the pocket can break down. I think really what it's about is making sure that Caleb Williams delivers more efficiently underneath and takes the easy plays to not allow them to have such third and long situations to keep the chains moving. And so the offense will look different because he's going to highlight all of his players. And honestly, the easiest way to say that is he took 2 slot receivers in Colston Loveland and Luther Burden with top 40 picks. So he knows he's going to have players that he will make work.
Right. And this is what I've said from the moment he was hired, that people are going to try to map like the Amon-Ra St. Brown role to this wide receiver room, or he's gonna try to make Caleb Williams play like Jared Goff, but Caleb Williams can't play like Jared Goff. I don't see any of that. I mean, because just in the receiver room, he didn't have a skill set of a guy like a Rome Odunze or a DJ Moore, frankly. And the fact that they've used DJ Moore and kind of like running, they've apparently have him line up at running back in training camp. I think that's pretty inspired usage for a guy that, I've hammered this point a lot. Like after I had a conversation with him at the Super Bowl, they were just throwing him like all of these worthless screens last year. And I keep coming back to a line that he said in that interview where I was asking about, hey, I always thought you would be a great in-space player used in kind of similar ways like Deebo Samuel. Why have we not seen that yet? And he talked about like, well, sometimes you get these plays where I'm paraphrasing, but nobody's, out there blocking for you. You're just kind of out in space. I'm like, yeah, that's what happened all last year when he's getting thrown these like screens as the farthest boundary receiver. I think we'll see these guys all be deployed in unique ways. And yeah, for a guy like Rome Odunze, there was nobody in Detroit or any of these offenses Johnson's been attached with that was like a true, and as he said, prototypical X receiver. So I love Rome Odunze. Everybody knows that. I'm a big fan of him as a player, so I think he's going to take that second-year leap. But I also think taking Colson Loveland and Luther Burden late in drafts is something I'm going to be very, very open to doing as well. But all right, we are going to toss to our first break here. We come back. We'll continue to roll through our lists right after this. All right, we are back continuing to run through our do's and don'ts for this fantasy draft season. Daigle, give us your third thing to do as drafts approach here.
Historically, it has been best to pick at the top half of drafts, and that's obviously because that's where usually the best players are. This year, however, I do want you to, whenever you go to the beach and run that 40 or play Mario Kart with your friends, I do want you to throw the contest all together and pick in the back of the first round. Just let me, Matt, list you some of these names that are going there. And remember, we usually do this with the idea of getting a player that could finish as the wide receiver 1 overall, the RB1 overall. Mm-hmm. And these names are players that can do so in Ashton Genty, Christian McCaffrey, Malik Neighbors, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., A.J. Brown, even Brock Bowers if you want to go tight end, and Drake London. Those are all available for you to double tack at the back end of the first round. So this year, that's where I want to pick. That's where I'm most confident in building, especially because when it wraps around the third or fourth round, and no one thinks about this because everyone's thinking about their first couple picks, and everyone is instead taking wide receivers or running backs that I like. But we're talking about RB2s, RB3s, or wide receiver 3s. In that instance, you can instead take Josh Allen, for example, and also get the QB1 overall. You can take George Kittle and get the potential tight end 1 overall in the fourth round. And so I think it is best set up for everyone this year to pick in the back of their drafts.
I love this take by you because this is definitely like my favorite teams have come in that range where, I mean, just even looking at the receivers there, man, to me, I think Nico Collins stands above the rest. No shock based on what you said earlier. I think he should actually be closer to like first tier Justin Jefferson type as opposed to the guys that come after. But even just like my second tier receivers, like Drake London, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., AJ Brown, like I don't think you should forego running back 2 or like, I think you gotta, I love the teams where I can get 2 of them in the first 4 rounds, which you could pull off in the next group. Like if you want to hit 2 of those running backs, I think it's possible, but if you want to go wide receiver in round 1 and round 2, like just stacking a team like with a Drake London and a Malik Neighbors, or a Drake London and a Brian Thomas Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown, or Brian Thomas Jr., that's a hell of a start, especially in any sort of like PPR format. You are really hammering that position there. But yeah, even the running backs that go in that range, like it's an awesome group. It really is an awesome group. So I love being able to snag two of those guys, and yeah, coming back and hitting elite quarterback with that as well is also great. So yeah, for me, like if you can grab a Derrick Henry and a Brian Thomas Jr., like, yeah, that's a potential running back 1 overall, wide receiver 1 overall. I love starting my teams that way.
It gets tougher at the front of the first and second round too. You're forced to make a lot of choices and quote unquote reach on players. Like I love Omari and Hampton, for example, but if you don't take him early in the third round, he's most likely just not coming back to you. Yeah. So you're forced to make a lot more decisions at the front, which is very, very tough. Whereas it seems like the back end, those tiers of players just fall to you. That's where I want to be.
Okay, so this actually dovetails pretty well to my third don't here, which the big point, like the big picture point, is I want to kind of highlight these early running backs and why I've liked to take a couple of them. But the player take is don't overthink it with Chase Brown. Daigle, which maybe I'm talking to nobody here, or maybe you disagree with me on this, and if you do, I'd love to hear it. But I thought there'd be more kind of like hesitancy on Chase Brown, and maybe I'm just listening to smart people. I don't know, but to me, he just looks locked in as a guy that is a top 12 running back this year. You know, somebody that I think passed the test with flying colors. I've mentioned this on the show before. Being at the combine, there is a part of me that hears the quote from Zach Taylor that I've mentioned on the show before, where he was talking about, yeah, we don't want to have Chase Brown on the field for every single snap like we did last year. We want to get somebody to run in tandem with him. Well, actions speak louder than words, buddy. They have not brought in anybody that I think is like a real threat to Chase Brown at all. In fact, they have got guys that can be like true snap eaters. Like Samaje Perine is a snap eater, but he's not going to dig into the rushing work share or significantly into the passing game work share for a guy like Chase Brown. You know, Taj Brooks is a rookie running back that people really like, but he is a 6th round rookie running back. You know, he would have to, I think, really outkick expectations to be a threat to Chase Brown. And it just sounds like, again, the quote from offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher that they're committed to, by the end of the season, Chase Brown is going to be a household name. I think that is true as well. So he's kind of not the last guy in the tier of running backs where, you know, it's the group that you talked about earlier, like those kind of end of the first round, you know, early second round type guys. But then the tier of like Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, like I think Chase Brown fits right into that group. And while he doesn't have necessarily the name value of some of those players, he plays in a great offense. He's got passing down work. Like, again, he just checks so many boxes. So I know sometimes we get hung up on these like day 3 flash in the pan running backs. I don't think Chase Brown is one of those guys. He's somebody that, to me, like I said, is locked in as a top 12 back this year.
Even in the high stake drafts in other formats I'm doing right now, I'll always take Chase Brown at the top in the 3rd round when it comes back to me. And that's ahead of James Cook, Breece Hall. And I just don't think he's going to be treated like that in home leagues. But remember, touches are the skeleton key for fantasy football for running backs. It's just a matter of us doing our job and projecting for those touches. But Chase Brown last year was unlocked because he got every single touch, played every single snap, ran every single route. And they brought, to your point, no one in to compete with him. He's someone that I was ready to come into the regular season and be lower on based on competition. But all we have is a good 6th round player in Taj Brooks who excels in pass catching. But again, that's just a 6th round rookie. That's not someone we should be scared of for Chase Brown's value. So I think he's going to go right back to that 5.5 targets, 24 touches per game that he averaged to close the year last season without Zach Moss. And he is, as you said, such a tremendous value to open the 3rd round.
Yeah, shoot, like that's the thing is if he's an 18 touch a game, like if he comes off of some of those touches because he's just getting a breather or whatever, he can still be well worth a 3rd round pick because he plays for the damn Bengals. Like they're going to score a lot of points. Like, yeah, those guys like Breece Hall or Chuba Hubbard, who I like in that range, they're just not playing for offenses that are at the level of the Cincinnati Bengals. So yeah, man, I really like Chase Brown a lot. He's somebody that I'm agreeing with you that I think that I came into this process being like, well, he might be kind of overvalued as a former day 3 back that the team's not that committed to. Well, they've shown a level of commitment to him over the course of this year, and I think he's earned that too. Like, it's not as if he was the only guy out there. I think he really, he's a guy I liked a lot last year, and he was somebody that just played really, really well over the course of the year. So yeah, man, Chase Brown, like, this is what I'm saying. You take a Derrick Henry in the second round in kind of that range. You take, or in the first round, you take one of those wide receivers we're talking about, second round picks. If you can somehow get Chase Brown in that third round there, you've started off with 2 potential running back ones and a wide receiver, any of those guys, not just Brian Thomas Jr., but any of those guys that could be the wide receiver 1 overall. That's a way to build a hell of a team there. But we're going to flip roles here, Daigle. We're going to go, I'll go to the positive. You go to the, quote, negative. Give us your first thing not to do in drafts this year.
We alluded to it earlier in the show, but I still want to emphasize that the big 3 tight ends and Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle are the big 3. And then after that, just a completely flat tier where I do not want people to panic about. Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, all have major flaws. And so we should just wait rather than thinking we should have a tight end early. I suggest everyone just wait until the back end and pick your favorite. As I mentioned earlier, when we talk about ambiguous target trees like the Green Bay Packers, who we are expecting to pass more for multiple reasons, mostly because go back to 2023 when Jordan Love averaged 6 more pass attempts per game, and last year he played through multiple injuries, so they had to lower the pass rate. At least that's my lean on it. As everyone takes Green Bay's wide receivers, that target tree is so wide open that even Tucker Kraft could instead lead the team in targets. And so I like taking shots on guys like that. I like George Pickens as much as anyone, but I would say the target tree behind CeeDee Lamb is still wide open as well. So Jake Ferguson, who they just gifted a boatload of money to in an extension, is also right there for the taking at the back end of tight ends. And so I'm just going to wait entirely rather than think I should reach on one of those veteran guys like Hawkinson or Kelce if I miss out on the big 3.
Yeah, Jake Ferguson seems to be a guy that like people don't want to draft.
It's crazy.
Like tight end 15 in ADP, 123rd overall. Like, I don't know how good Jake Ferguson is, but I know he plays in a good offense and a quarterback that, some of this stuff is stupid, right? Like, oh, this guy loves to throw to this position, right? It doesn't always work out that way, but I mean, they've run through just a ton of kind of random names at tight end, and Dak always keeps them involved. And honestly, like, they've had a lot of carryover in the playbook. I think that's a part of it. And it's like, I always mention this, that, they run this play and they've done it over Kellen Moore's time. They've done it with Mike McCarthy too, where like CeeDee Lamb will run a big post route and take 2 defenders, and Dak just loves to throw it on a little hook route or just like a little stop route to Jake Ferguson over the middle of the field. It was Dalton Schultz before him as well. Like, that is just a consistent play, even if it's like a quick in break or 2 run after the catch. And I think Ferguson has some yak ability. So yeah, I'm going to be very, very overweight on Pickens this year. I think he's one of the most mispriced, if not the most mispriced player in fantasy right now. But that doesn't also say I can't take Jake Ferguson a little later on. Colson Loveland's another guy.
By the way, is to just take Dak Prescott in the Cowboys passing game.
Right.
Like, we are 1 year removed from Dak Prescott being the QB5 in fantasy points and finishing second in MVP voting behind Lamar Jackson. And everyone just forgets about that because CeeDee Lamb held out and admits himself he didn't show up to the regular season in condition whatsoever. And also, Dak Prescott was throwing to Jalen Tolbert and Brandon Cooks as his second receiver, not George freaking Pickens. So the lesson is to just get high. Like, I do think the Brian Schottenheimer movement and taking the ping pong table and putting it in the locker room and taking players out to dinner, like, I think it's a big joke, honestly. But the fact is the Cowboys are so top heavy, and the regular season, I just don't think they can fail.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to be really in on this offense this year. Okay, my first do here is I want you guys to put a premium on teams with good offensive lines, right? Like, the whole deal is, how do we find these good ecosystems where we can take 1, 2, 3, 4 players from them? it's good ecosystems to have good offensive lines, like, good play callers as well, good quarterbacks. Yes. So I'm just going to break into two groups here for people to think about, Daigle. I'm going to get your opinion on both groups. Number one, I think the obvious teams that this should, like, again, these should be obvious. Not everybody knows about offensive lines, but 4 teams that I think are obvious to put a premium on because their offensive lines are really good: Eagles, Bucks, Broncos, Bills. I think in fantasy, we're interested in a lot of players from those offenses, but are there any players and units that maybe we should like more than where they're kind of going ADP wise, kind of based on this analysis here?
I believe it's the Eagles, and it's not in the direction that everyone's thinking, because we relate the offensive line to the running back, and that makes sense. But Jalen Hurts, as we talked about, you draft in the back of the first round, for example, it comes back in the 3rd, 4th round turn to you. And then that's a group of players like Terry McLaurin, Devontae Adams, Jackson Smith, and Jigba that I like. But again, Jalen Hurts is also right there, someone who has shown us he can finish as the overall QB1, and we should believe in a regression for the Eagles' passing offense. Last year, for example, Hurts had averaged 7 fewer pass attempts per game than he did in 2023. And I don't think that's just because they added Saquon Barkley. I think it's the schedule and how little they had to throw in the second half of the year, where these things year over year just naturally regress. And that's what we try to pay attention to and suggest to everyone listening that we should be ahead of. Even go back to their injuries and recall that A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert only played 79 plays together with Hurts. They just weren't available. So what happens if the Eagles have to pass more? What happens if they're at full strength in the passing game? I think it all allows Hurts, including that offensive line, to just be better overall through the air. So yes, the Eagles are one I'm definitely highlighting.
Yeah, I love taking their wide receivers where they're going right now. Jalen Hurts is a good fallback plan if you still want to go high-end quarterback as well. I'll throw out the Broncos here on this one too, and I'm curious where to take this one, right? Like, the Broncos' offensive line is really good. They were great in pass protection. They were quietly good in as a run-blocking unit last year, but you mentioned Devontae Williams earlier. They didn't have anybody to take advantage of that. I think people want to draft R.J. Harvey for sure. I totally get that one. But in the pass-catching group here, Daigle, have you had like a lean towards any of these guys? Because I still haven't like quite figured out. Like, I don't know if you mentioned Evan Ingram when you were talking about tight ends, like where he fits in that sort of in that tier of guys there, but I haven't been like super bullish one way or another on any of the pass catchers, except taking Pat Bryant super late in drafts, just because I think he fits in well in this wide receiver room, and they're looking for a true 2 across from Cortland Sutton. But like, this is an offense that I want to be in on this year, but I haven't quite found my path to getting exposure to it just yet.
It's a very complicated offense to discuss, because I think everyone's going to play. That's the issue with Sean Payton,
right?
Is that he really does roll out everyone. And so I like Pat Bryant, like you. I like Devon Vele, who I did not like as a prospect and then proved me wrong last season whenever he was available in the second half of the year. Marvin Mims has shown us if they give him an opportunity, although I still believe he's pigeonholed under Sean Payton as a gadget player. But if he gets an opportunity, he has a very high ceiling. I just think they have so many players that excel at one thing. They are naturally going to play all of them, and that puts a dent on their volume outside of Cortland Sutton. Bo Nix is also an interesting conversation. You know, when I mentioned drafting Drake Maye, he's also going to go after Bo Nix, and I think that's incorrect. Nix at least showed us that he has a promise. He's a promising player in the NFL, where even I had question marks about that coming out of Oregon. But also, remember, price matters in this dumb little game of fantasy football we're playing. And Bo Nix last year was going basically undrafted, even in Superflex leagues. And we knew that was incorrect at the time, just to take a shot on a quarterback with athleticism and draft capital. Whereas this year now, he's being treated as a top 12 guy. And I think that's a mistake, since the cost has gotten significantly better. He broke out last year, did a lot of things different, started passing a lot more behind the line of scrimmage in order to get plays upfield rather than forcing things to happen downfield. But also, that happened last year against one of the easiest schedules in the entire league, and the running he showed at the first half of the year became significantly inconsistent at the cost of then peppering behind the line of scrimmage. So I'm a little bit worried about Bo Nix just for fantasy. Again, showed he's a very good player that we were wrong on, but yes, I think the Broncos are just naturally going to play everyone, and that's scary.
No, it's totally fair about Nix. He was a guy that I really wanted to be excited about this year, but like he just goes a little too early in that massive tier where I haven't gotten a lot of Bo Nix. But certainly it really good fit in Sean Payton's offense and somebody that I think can be an exciting player for them for the long term. I'll throw out 5 offensive lines that I think have improved based on offseason moves, and just I want to know which one of these stand out, and maybe maybe a team I might have missed here. Vikings really remade the interior offensive line, drafting Donovan Jackson, adding Ryan Kelly and Will Fries from the Indianapolis Colts. They're going to want to run the ball a lot better. The Bears, we know that was like the first thing Ben Johnson and co did was remake that offensive line. The Titans could really go from awful to maybe functional or maybe even average with the moves that they made in the offseason. The Chiefs, Josh Simmons, their first round pick. If he's healthy, he's going to be a steal at 31st overall. He's got nothing but rave reviews out of training camp. And the Jets as well. Olu Fashanu, former first-round pick in his second year, adding Armand Membu, like that could quietly be a really, really good offensive line with some young players developing, especially if they can stay healthy with a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker this year as well. So any of those 5, one of those 5 teams stand out to you, and did I miss anyone here?
Didn't miss anyone, and honestly, all of them stand out, but I think the player that's going to capitalize the most is Justin Fields, just because Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrand are not lying to themselves. They saw Justin Fields average 110 rushing yards against them with the Bears. They know his strengths. And unlike the Raiders, who I think also with Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll want to come into the year running the ball heavily, the Jets have elite pieces on defense. The Raiders do not. And that's why I think we're going to get some really fun shootouts with Geno Smith indoors and Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers throughout the year. But the Jets can play their style of ball and playing keep away and just using Justin Fields, who again, and this wide open flat tier of QB2 range, Justin Fields now, the last 2 years, has been a top 12 quarterback in 59% of his starts. He's averaged 8.5 rushing points per game since 2022. This is what he does. Even with the Steelers, when he was benched, he was the QB8 in points per game. This is what he does well, is be startable in fantasy regardless of what happens through the air. What happens through the air is the cherry on top. That's how he would eventually become a top 4, top 5 guy. Even if it's not successful outside of Garrett Wilson, who is going to be a 150-plus target guy, Justin Fields alone provides value. And so I think that's the one that's helped out the most.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson, better than any receiver, in my opinion, that Fields has worked with so far. So I'm excited to see their connection. But yeah, it's funny. Like, I think Justin Fields, you mentioned like this is who he is, and it happens no matter what. I think he almost like doesn't really want to run that much anymore. And part of this is just like, I've watched him play, but also, again, I'll harken back to a conversation I had with him when Austin Eckler and I were still doing a show together. This was at the Super Bowl 2 years ago, maybe 3. Oh my God, was that like 3 years ago now at this point? It was the Phoenix Super Bowl, the Niners and Chiefs, I believe. No, the first Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl. We had him on the show, and Austin was like, "Yeah, there's only 1,000-yard rusher on this stadium, and it's not me." And spoiler alert, also was not me. And Justin kind of like was like, "Yeah," like kind of rolled his eyes at it. And at the end of the conversation, Austin said, "I hope you can run for 1,000 yards again." And Fields goes, "I hope I don't." Like, he was worn out after that season where he ran the ball so much. And I think these guys want to develop as quarterbacks, but we'll see. I'm not throwing cold water on Fields because I am in on where he's going, ahead of where he's going, really. But it is like sneaking suspicion to me that maybe Fields wants to dial the rushing back a little bit. But even still, Daigle, I think he wanted to do it last year. And as you mentioned, he still backed his way into some usable quarterback weeks.
And I believe he should be taken confidently as a player you don't even need to stack. You can take Garrett Wilson for sure, but beyond that, there are major question marks, so much so that rookie tight end Mason Taylor is being highlighted as the team's second best receiver right now. So let's just take Justin Fields and be happy with that.
Exactly. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, we're going to take our second break. We come back, we'll continue to run through our lists right after this. All right, we are back. John Daigle and I are continuing to offer up our do's and don'ts for this draft season. I will throw out a do here, my second here on the list. I do want you guys to figure out the 2 to 3 huge letdown offenses and just cross any non-elite players or fringe elite players off of your draft list from those teams. I'm just going to give one example here, Daigle, because honestly, I'm still sort of figuring out like who are going to be one of these 2 to 3 huge letdown offenses. But, I was writing a piece the other day about like rookies that I've noticed, reports on in camp so far. And I was talking about Cam Scatterboot, the New York Giants, 4th round rookie running back. And like, oh, he's getting work with the first team. And honestly, like I just found it hard to care about the Giants running back like duo or the running back competition between Cam Scatterboot or Tyron Tracy, because I think these guys are probably both fine NFL players. But how many touchdowns are the damn Giants going to score this year? Like how good is this offense going to truly be? I think that like Malik Neighbors is aside from this. Okay, this is what I'm saying. Like Malik Neighbors he might not be like an elite wide receiver just yet in the NFL, but he's right there. He's close. Like he could make that leap this season and be that guy. We know he is Teflon in terms of production. It doesn't matter who's throwing the football. He's going to be great. So I don't really even care about this when it comes to him. But again, this is what I mean. Like you can spend your time thinking like, all right, is it going to be Cam Scatterboot or is it going to be Tyron Tracy? But there is an option C here, which is it doesn't matter because the team is not going to be that good and the offense is not going to be that good. Like these guys, you don't have to spend a premium pick on one of these running backs, but this is sort of my thought process here. Sometimes it just pays to just say, hey, this team's going to be terrible. I'm not drafting any players from this team. Let's keep it moving.
This one for me is the Cleveland Browns, where even Jerry Jeudy, who broke out, we can at least look and say he was an entirely different player depending on who was under center. With Jameis Winston, the wide receiver 2 in points per game. Not shocking. Jameis Winston throws downfield. With Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jeudy, though, was the wide receiver 34. And with Deshaun Watson, he was the wide receiver 71. So I'm very much questioning what Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Shador Sanders. I'm questioning how far will they drag Jerry Jeudy down at a premium mid-round pick in fantasy drafts. So, yes, I think the Browns, the Giants, I agree with you. Outside of elite players, and the Browns, you can question if they have any elite players, I am staying away from.
And you look at that one of those games where DTR was under center. That was like Jerry Jeudy gets 18 targets, 12 catches for like 94 yards. Yeah. Just, disgusting stuff because the people he's competing for targets with, like David Njoku's not even playing. Cedric Tillman's long gone at that point. Shoot, even Dante Foreman's starting a running back in that game. So it's just like I think that they are the tough part of this, Daigle, is that I do think like Cedric Tillman's a nice late round pick because I think the projections between him and Jeudy should probably be closer than the ADP is, but yeah, we're also going off a very small sample with Cedric Tillman. So I don't mind taking him as like a 12th rounder because in redraft leagues, I can just cut him if he's nothing and the Browns offense is disgusting, which it probably is going to be. And I don't mind taking like a dart throw at one of their running backs, Jerome Ford or Dylan Sampson, because I don't love the fact that Quinshon Judkins deserves it at this point, but the owner's saying I'm cautiously optimistic he's going to play for this team. So I think he's like an untouchable guy in drafts right now, but I don't mind those like little late round dart throws, but for the most part, like, yeah, I have not been drafting Jeudy. I've not really been drafting David Njoku either. Cause again, like how many touchdowns is his team going to score?
And when you say elite players, you even highlighted, you mean a Malik Neighbors, who already finished as the wide receiver 8 weekly last year and did so with the machination of Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, and even Drew Lock. People don't remember because by that time, Malik Neighbors was averaging double-digit targets, but still like not delivering because of how inefficient those targets were. But Malik Neighbors in the fantasy championship in week 17, if you happen to make it there, did blow up indoors against the Colts for those 3 touchdowns and 150 plus yards from Drew Lock, because that's how good he is. The Giants this year do have the league's toughest schedule, including the hardest schedule of passing defenses in the first 7 weeks. So I'm worried, but also, I don't know if you've done a lot of work on Jackson Dart yet. I honestly think Jackson Dart is the best quarterback to come out of this class, despite not being treated as one. So if we get Jackson Dart for the second half of the season, which is what I believe will happen, I do think he could honestly be like the best quarterback Neighbors has played with to date.
Yeah, low bar, but definitely possible. Right?
Relative,
like very
low
low bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a team that makes me feel this way sometimes is like the Saints. God, I just their quarterback competition so far. Like Jake Hayner's getting first team reps, which hand up, I did not see that one coming. I thought it would just be like, hey, Spencer Rattler, can you beat out Tyler Shuck? But Shuck has not been impressing. Rattler is who he is. Like I want to take the discounts on Olave and Shaheed, and honestly even Alvin Kamara a little bit, but then again, I come back to they might be the worst offense in the NFL. They might pick first in the NFL draft. So they're certainly a team that I would listen to an argument to cross them off the list. But let's keep moving here. Daigle, give me your second don't for drafts this year.
I don't want people to draft injured players, but I think the better way to explain it is do not pay a premium for injured players. Understand that they are injured. And even if we can predict, especially as best ball has become more important now and an impactful part of the offseason the last 2-3 years, we are seeing, we've done this long enough to see that people project for when a player returns. T.J. Hawkinson just last year, for example. But it doesn't matter because that player's still injured and we're still questioning how many weeks it takes them to get to full strength if they at any point reach full strength. Nick Chubb, Isaiah Pacheco, David Montgomery just last year when they returned. And so, especially in redraft leagues, when we can just go elsewhere, do not pay a premium, in my opinion, for guys like Chris Godwin, who's already on the PUP list due to his minor ankle cleanup, as they called it, that was not expected to open camp. Najee Harris, who still has this ominous eye injury, and no one knows the exact extent of it. Brandon Ayuk, last report we actually got on Brandon Ayuk, and it could be right or wrong, but the last report was from Adam Schefter's podcast back in March, where he had heard and expected Brandon Ayuk to miss half the season. Again, even if Ayuk were to return, what does it look like when he returns with that injury? Right. And then, of course, Joe Mixon right now, who's now dealing with the same foot injury, but the third time in the last calendar year it's been injured. These are players first of all, again, do not want to draft at ADP, but even as they fall 3-4 rounds, you just have to be cognizant that this could be a 0 with an important pick. So I'm just going to avoid those red flags altogether personally.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, it's going to be tough when you're sitting there in your draft and you just see like Joe Mixon, who's right now, even still is running back 20 in ADP. And obviously that has fallen, but you're going to see him, stacked up against names like Brian Robinson or something like that, or Jordan Mason. It's just at some point you're going to want to catch that falling knife, but you know what? That thing's going to cut you when you catch it. Like that's the thing. And like, man, these are two of my favorite receivers in the league, Chris Godwin and Brandon Ayuk. Like when those guys are cooking, they are great players. But even then, I'm just burying them in my ranks that if like you're using my rankings, you're not drafting these guys because you mentioned best ball. And like, obviously, best ball is super important. It's a huge part of our industry now. But I also think that some of the analysis of best ball has like creeped into the redraft discourse, Daigle, almost to a detriment where it's like, yeah, in best ball, like if just hypothetically, and I'm saying hypothetically because my God, I hope it happens. Brandon Ayuk comes back after like 4 or 5 weeks or something like that. And he's just back in shape week 15, 16, 17, where you really want to win all the money in your best ball league. And he's cooking. He ends up being a great pick. But if Brandon Ayuk misses half the season and you took him in redraft at where he's going right now, which isn't horrible. I think I'm trying to pull it up real quick, but it's like in the, in the 40s ish. He might be still have fallen a little far. Yeah. Wide receiver 44. And he just gives you nothing. Like it's great to make it to those last few weeks of the season, but in redraft, like you got to make it there. It's just how do you make it to the fantasy playoffs? You start hot, like winning in September is still a thing that really, really matters. I think even more so in redraft than in best ball.
Last year, everyone was frustrated at Christian McCaffrey directly because he came back and then got re-injured. But I think the lesson in all of that should have been to just not take players again who go into the regular season with an injury. And I did that with Christian McCaffrey. So now maybe I've even been speaking this lesson because I personally learned it. But yes, I'm avoiding those guys. And I understand the most recent example is Puka Nacua, who was injured, but then came into the second half of the year and scorched the earth. But that is an anomaly. as opposed to thinking that's going to happen with players like Ayuk and Godwin. So I'm definitely worried about those two in particular.
No question. Yeah. Being around Scott Pianowski for as long as I have now, and happy to work with Scott. Scott. No, Scott is the man. I'm giving him praise here because he is the one who's been drilled. He's drilled it into me over the years. Win in September. Don't like fade injury optimism, because when I was younger, and fresh-eyed, I was all about injury optimism and if I can get this guy and just stash him on my bench for 4 weeks, like, oh, that's going to be great. And just over the years, like you said, you learn the lesson over and over again, especially right now when these teams don't got to tell you the truth. Like that was the thing with Christian McCaffrey last year. They don't got to tell you if he's going to be available for week 1. They don't have to file an injury report. And I feel like that's a lot that's what has been, and now certainly is going on with Joe Mixon right now. He is somebody that just can't take at all until we get some more clarity. I'll get to my final and third due here. I know that like rookie ADP wide receiver wise, it's gotten sharper. Like some of these guys are pushed up the board, but I still want you to take them. I still want you to take these guys in the late rounds. And even if you don't want to take them in the late rounds, keep them on that waiver wire speed dial, man. The Texans rookies, both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Higgins probably has more path to immediate playing time, although I think Noel's the better player. Just keep those guys on your radar because you want to have them for the back half of the year, right? And if you can be early on that, if you can be early on the post-buy rookie bump, you want to do it. Luther Burden, right? If he's a guy who really ticks up over the course of the season, because if you come out and they don't have week 1 roles, again, you can they're easy drops for that first like hot waiver wire running back or whatever. And there's just more path to, again, when you're doing projections, like, does Darius Slayton or Wan'Dale Robinson project for more volume than, I don't know, Jack Besh or Kyle Williams running into week 1? Yeah, sure. But I can tell you who's going to be more likely to be an upside play, and it is those rookie wide receivers. So some of the guys like Tedder McMillan, Travis Hunter, they've been priced up. I still like where those guys are going right now, but just generally those rookies, keep them on that waiver wire speed dial, or if you have enough bench space, stash them for a while as well.
My favorite players for this example are Kyle Williams, who I discussed earlier, and Trey Harris for the Chargers. But I also understand that initially in the first month, most likely Kayshon Boutte and Quentin Johnston blocked those two players. Having said that, I believe their ceilings, the rookies, are significantly higher than the veterans ahead of them. And we are not projecting right now for 17 games. Like fantasy football is played in windows. And so I will leave room on my bench for that. And then in redraft league, we can always just cut the guy, unfortunately, if we have to. But we're hopefully building our roster to where we can hold on to them, understanding that if they get a chance, they can easily break out.
I love those two examples. Yeah, Trey Harris, man, like let's get that guy into the X receiver role for the Chargers. It's just like he's just such a perfect fit there. All right, give us your third and final note of the 12 overall here, Daigle.
We've alluded to this throughout the show, but I think everyone is listening to this podcast, everyone in the world, because they do want to learn. And what they should learn is that we are projecting, and so they should not fall for recency bias. We are trying to explain why you should take Christian McCaffrey despite last year's results, why you should fade Jared Goff despite last year's results. And I think two of the biggest examples, as we do not fall for recency bias, are what you and I believe. And I haven't even got your opinions on this, but based on how you talk about a few individual players within their offense, I know what you're going to say. And I'm going to use the Packers and the Texans as my example, based on we do not think they are going to be what they were last year at all.
Yeah.
Jordan Love in this Packers offense under Matt LaFleur, for the entire time LaFleur had coached there, that team had never dropped below a 58% neutral pass rate, for example. Last year, because of these injuries Jordan Love suffered, they were at a career low 49% neutral pass rate under Matt LaFleur. They go out, they add Matthew Golden to play the Christian Watson role in the first round. The offense is going to look entirely different. And at least we know Jaden Reed, despite the fact he comes with a significant discount this year, in the first 2 games he played with Jordan Love, he went over 100 yards and a touchdown in both of them. And then the offense just didn't pass more. So what if I cross my fingers and say, I've seen Jaden Reed be a weekly wide receiver 2, and now you can get him at wide receiver 4 cost. I'm going to take that chance again. And another example is the Houston Texans. You and I very high on Nico Collins, who without Stephon Diggs last year, an absurd 37% target share in the second half of the season. But more importantly, we don't expect them to be the Bobby Slowick form of offense. Nick Caley now comes over from the Rams, and I'm crossing my fingers that he learned something from Sean McVay. But the one thing I hope he learned is that unlike Slowick, who frustratingly ran the ball far too often on early downs, and that's why over the last 2 years, the Texans have averaged 3rd and 7.5 yards to go. With Matthew Stafford, the Rams not once in any season averaged even 7 yards to go on 3rd down. Sean McVay and hopefully Caley understand the idea is to get shorter 3rd downs or move the chains altogether to keep your offense flowing and scoring points. The Texans also went out and added 4 new offensive linemen. You discussed earlier how maybe that doesn't mean new pieces are improved, but at least changing the situation that was bad altogether. So hopefully it improves even slightly. I think they're going to be pass heavy with CJ Stroud, who everyone just wanted to take as the QB6 off the board last year, and now you can get him after the 12th round. So what if we just take that chance instead and buy this dip? Again, do not fall for recency bias.
Great call out here, and I love the 2 teams that you threw out. With the Packers, it's easy, man. I think you just watched that week 1 game in Brazil against the Eagles. They were not trying to come out last season and be this like, hey, let's hide the quarterback, ground and pound team. They went to that because of necessity. They went to that because Jordan Love was banged up. Like I fully believe that we have completely over-indexed as an industry on what the Packers were last year, both from like a receiver usage perspective and just what they like their overall run heaviness. Like, yeah, Jaden Reed, I get it. He didn't run in 2 receiver sets. And I, like I said to Boone earlier on the earlier this week on the show, I want to both acknowledge that, yes, that is important. And also, like, I think we've jumped the shark with how important the 2 receiver set thing is. But like, what if Jaden Reed plays more in 2 receiver sets? And it's him and Matthew Golden, these 2 like tough covers. And man, like we're talking about 2 real ADP beaters. Like I am very in on both of those guys, especially Jaden Reed where he goes, because he's a proven player, man. Like he's a really, really good player. So love those Packers guys. And yeah, the Texans too, like different isn't always better. But it might be on the offensive line, especially because most of it was a coaching issue. And your point about them being more pass heavy is really well taken. I hadn't really thought about this because, yeah, like the reason that teams could throw a bunch of stunts and blitz and stuff that the Texans offensive line from a coaching perspective couldn't handle is because they were always behind the sticks, man. They're always in those obvious passing down situations. So if we see this team move more pass heavy, if we see this team, you know, again, Nick Caley coming from not just a Rams background, but also a Patriots background, move like Nico Collins around the formation more like, hey, what if we put Nico, who is one of these 80% outside on the line of scrimmage players, what if we get him off the line of scrimmage, running full speed motion to the snap, and like on 1st down, we're throwing that guy a quick inbreaker and we're moving the football down the field. Like that could honestly be more important than the offensive line issue, which I'm sure you feel the same way, Daigle. The first thing that you get in response to talking about any Texans right now, well, the offensive line is going to suck, so it's not really going to matter. And look, that might be true, but it also might not.
Similar to Zach Taylor with Joe Burrow, I'm not sure what Taylor brings to the table. I think they just drafted Joe Burrow, and he makes everyone around him look good. This was always my concern with Bobby Slowick, especially last year when it was clear that he was dragging the offense down, but he had CJ Stroud, who's a superhero. And I think everyone forgets that after his rookie season, we really thought CJ Stroud could elevate to be MVP of the league at some point. I still think that conversation is wide open, including this year, especially with a better play caller.
Yeah, I think it is as well. I'm very excited to watch the Texans this year. And yeah, hopefully CJ Stroud they give him a little more protection. They go from probably one of the 3 worst offensive lines to maybe somewhere around 21st. I think that would be enough to get all these guys there. Daigle, this is fantastic. You absolutely crushed it. I really appreciate it. I always say this whenever you come back on the show. I will never forget the time I had you on for a big free agency show, and it was literally just a bunch of like second tight ends had signed. I don't know if you remember this a few years ago. So I always appreciate when you can actually come on here and talk about some football players that matter. So I appreciate you doing this with me, buddy. Tell the people what you're working on right now that they can check out all throughout draft season.
I not only remember that, but will always come back on because I remember we share a love for Sterling Shepard. And they can also find me at not Jay Daigle on Twitter and establishtherun.com, where I'm cranking out and finalizing team previews this week, not to mention tiers of Evan Silva and rankings, also starting mock drafts, because it's that time of the year where you and I show up and there's something to do every single day. So please come along for the ride at establishtherun.com.
No doubt about it. Love the guys over at ETR. I'm actually going to be on the show with Adam and Evan next week. So definitely make sure that you check out all of the Establish the Run content. That is going to do it for this show and this show on this YouTube channel. That is right. I'm going to remind you again. Go to the Yahoo Fantasy YouTube channel and subscribe. I will be personally hurt. I will complain to Charlie and Peach all day, my two dogs, about it if you don't do this. So please, if you don't do it for me, do it for Charlie and Peach. You have to support them. They're two wonderful dogs, and they will go hungry if you do not subscribe to the damn YouTube channel. That is also going to do it for our 2 pods a week schedule. That is right. Starting next week, we are 5 days a week starting next week in your feeds all the time, all the way through your fantasy football championships. And to launch our new Yahoo Fantasy YouTube channel into the stratosphere next Monday, August 4th, we have not 1, but 2 episodes coming out that day. The first one is going to be a special edition of the pod with Justin Boone hitting feeds that morning. Super secret topic, so you don't want to miss that. Then at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on Monday, I'm going to be live with Ray Garvin as we identify the 10 sleepers you can't sleep on this draft season. How could you possibly miss out on that? Until then, we are out.